It's nice to see a few of the, shall I say, older, familiar faces in the room. Myself, I don't age at all. I always say that gym is for people who can't afford plastic surgery, and I'm glad I don't have to go to gym. Today, I really want to celebrate diversity. So between Dawie and myself, I think we are the most diverse team around, male and female. That's fairly obvious. The young and the younger, the industrial engineer and the mechanical engineer, and how we work together. But most importantly, I think it's one of the only presentations at this conference where you would have an industrialist giving a bit of the academic background and the academic giving some practical examples. So on that note, let's start with what we're talking about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Internet of Things and how we classify it and why we are interested in it. Dawie's then going to show you application in industry and how it's being used currently. And I'm going to talk about the business models that it unlocks for us. So if you look at IoT, it really is about, and you know, people talk about IoT and they talk about their Fitbits or their Apple Watches. That is a very low-level example of that. It really is smart connected devices, and the two operative words are smart and connected. So it has intelligence in the product, but it also has always-on connectivity to the internet, or at least as real-time as required by that business process. The industrial internet is a term that I prefer. It's referred to quite a lot in a lot of the research in the Harvard Business Review, but also in forums like the TED Talks. They talk about the industrial internet, and they say that machines talking to machines or things talking to each other will form the fourth industrial revolution after steam and water. The first one, electricity and really division of labor, the whole IT industry as the third one, and now the connected internet or Internet of Things, the fourth one. The scale, just to show you the scale of growth, in 2015 it was estimated that 6 billion devices were connected to the internet. It grows exponentially, absolutely exponentially every year, and it's projected that by 2020 more than 50, and some estimates more than 60 billion devices will be connected to the internet. And yes, it will be your fridge to help us buy milk better, I suppose. But in the real sense and where it will make the most impact is in industry. And that's what we are interested in here today. It gives us new models for business. It gives us opportunities for leveraging value out of an industry that we currently do not see or have today. This is quite an interesting model that I found in the Harvard Business Review. It's a model by Porter that says, and it's a very simple model, but it's one of those models that talk to you. It says that for us to leverage the full value of the Internet of Things, we first have to be able to monitor something. And when you can monitor something, the next phase of maturity is to control it. And after controlling that, you can start thinking about optimizing that. And after optimization, then you can say, well, I can now automate that process fully with no human involvement anymore. And some examples, yes, that's the Fitbit I'm talking about at the bottom, or some sports goods manufacturers now embed sensors within the devices so that you can track your golf swing or your tennis, what do you call that? That thing that you do with a tennis racket. An interesting one is that in the reservoirs of Singapore, they have what they call the new swans, and the new swans just float around. They measure acidity, oxygen levels, quality of water, and as that quality of water actually is pinged back, it's just monitoring. So whether the oxygen levels in water goes up or down, the swan can't decide based on business rules whether that's good or bad. There's still a human sitting on the other side. So it's purely for monitoring purposes that is used. A better example of control, so a further phase of control is that if you look at the devices like the Nest home control devices, that can control the lighting as you walk into the room. It can control the music that's played in the room, or if it realizes that myself and my teenage daughter are in the room, it will play a different set of music. Neither mine nor hers, but a third set that we both selected that have overlap. And that shows that there's a little bit more intelligence in the system, a little bit more business rules built in. The third one, optimization, now it becomes really interesting. So General Electric, and I will talk about the business model that they follow later and how they changed their business model. But General Electric do not supply engines to the aerospace or to the airline industry anymore. They only lease it per flight hour, which means they also take on the maintenance of those devices. So they no longer sell it, so it's not a revenue line for them to sell the airline or the airplane engines, but they only lease it. And they monitor those airline or the engines absolutely to the last T. Everything that can move, shake, or bend on that engine is being monitored by them so that they know when to bring it in for preventative maintenance. The other one that's very interesting is ThyssenKrupp. ThyssenKrupp has put lifts, and that's the bottom picture. If you can't see it, it's a bunch of lifts. They put IoT monitoring on absolutely everything within the lift so that they can send their service team out like the AA, but on a very intelligent basis. So they use field services connected to the IoT. So if a lift picks up a problem, it can classify it, it can send the closest, so it's location aware, it can send the closest service guy out to go and service that lift. They piloted this whole model in Seattle, and the field services was built on the Microsoft Field One platform. And they have obviously encountered much higher service levels and at about a more efficient rate. The last one, autonomy, it's difficult to find examples of that. But if you have a truly autonomous car service, so think about Uber, but think about completely autonomous with no human intervention, self-driving cars, self-driving vehicles, that could be a fully automated system. The more interesting one is to look for business models that are within the cloud completely, where business processes run whilst you're sitting on the beach. So it's machines to machines performing a valuable task to a business. You invoice for that task, but you're not close to it at all. You develop that process, you build the business rules, you can make the changes remotely if you want to. But in principle, there's no human intervention at all, fully automated. And that's the next level of business models that is interesting to us. If you look at Gartner, I'm definitely not going to read all of that, but I'm sure my slides will be available afterwards. Those are the 10, they publish this every year, the 10 most strategic technology trends. If you read them, about 9 of the 10 talks to the Internet of Things. It touches it in some way. I think the only thing that doesn't directly relate to that, to the Internet of Things on that slide, is 3D printing. And you could argue that 3D printing could be a result of the Internet of Things. There's an order being placed or a sense of an order being placed, and therefore something is printed on a just-in-time basis. So why is the Internet of Things suddenly taking off now? Data storage cost, it comes down exponentially. But it has a lower limit, and that lower limit is the thickness of a molecule, isn't it? The bottoming out of connectivity costs. So if you look at everywhere else except South Africa, where the fees and the connectivity costs must fall, the cost of data and connectivity actually comes down significantly on a year-on-year basis. The sensor cost specifically comes down. I can read that for you. That is a 3D LiDAR sensor. It came down 250 times in 5 years. That's significant. It's not small fry. And that is a nanotech graphene-based sensor, and the cost of that came down 80% in the time period from 2014 to 2020 projected. So the cost of those sensors are coming down, and that was a prohibitive one. The cost of connectivity comes down. The cost of data storage comes down. And all of those things start playing together and gives us the opportunity to leverage the Internet of Things. So let's talk about the new technology stack. So when we design products, be it a fridge, be it a tennis ball apparently, or be it a high-tech device that's used in industry, we now no longer only think of a hardware product. We think of the product as having a software and a hardware component. That is connected obviously through a connectivity stack, and that is why you can see organizations like Vodafone becoming very vocal about the Internet of Things. Not that it's going to compete with your voice calls or your data connectivity. It's completely different bands. But they are very active in trying to leverage that. And then it connects to the product cloud. And that product cloud has a very different stack. It's a new thing, actually. Currently, we don't have a product cloud or a product stack in the cloud. That connects to external sources and your business rules. So that it says that if I have the Internet of Things, it monitors the temperature of a cold truck delivering ice cream for Pick n Pay or Woolworths. It is necessary to actually have business rules around that. If the truck is on its way through the Free State and the temperature goes beyond 5 degrees, there should be a message going out. A service guy needs to be informed. The owner of the truck needs to be informed, or the operator. So those business rules start becoming very important as well. And then around that, I wouldn't say it sits on the side, but that's me. It's around that is the whole identity and security layer that makes also the Internet of Things and the adoption thereof really slow. So why the company like Resolve interested in this, and why are we working with the PhDs, the young PhDs, is that we see a massive future in the opportunities that the Internet of Things will bring to anything as a service. So if you want to provide a managed services or an outsourced service to industry, it is in your interest to actually start running a research program into new business models where you look at anything as a service. That is going to be how we make money in future. That's where the opportunities lie, and that's why we're interested in it. So I can tell you as well that if I want to hang a new painting in my house, I need a hole in the wall. I don't need a drill. And I certainly don't need my husband. So that takes another 2 years. So what I do need is the service of doing that. And I might be prepared to pay a huge amount more for that hole than I am prepared to pay for the drill. But in effect, I don't need the drill. I want somebody else to invest in the drill. And that's the as a service kind of model that I'm talking about. So if you look at the competitive advantage or the competitive environment currently, on the left-hand side, it just says that the environment is changing. The suppliers into that industry is exponentially changing their technology. And that's not only the sensor technology, it is also things like data, the cloud, artificial intelligence, all of those machine learning, all of those ugly cousins start playing together, and they give us the opportunity to leverage the opportunities in new business models. But it also gives us the opportunity to do introspection and to say, but what business are we in? Are we in the business of supplying airline engines, or are we in the business of providing flight hours, strategically speaking? And that kind of questions every business has to ask. If you haven't asked that in the last year, you are behind the curve, absolutely. So the Internet of Things, or the fourth industrial revolution, gives us the opportunity to leverage IT in a new way, where the old cycle of IT leveraging information technology has really come to an end. There's and we see it in pricing. We see it in the fact that the laptop prices have bottomed out. Your connectivity costs have bottomed out. Your storage costs are starting to bottom out. All of a sudden, new business models come into play because of other things starting to play together that gives you opportunity to leverage that as well. So just talking, we are in an agricultural environment, so I feel more at ease talking about this than I am doing this talk in Sandton. But initially, my grandfather bought a tractor, and that was a product that he bought, and he bought it purely based on the characteristics of that product and how long it would last and how people gossiped about it. All of a sudden, they made it a smart product, so it got a little bit of a dashboard. We know where it is, we know what it can do, and then it becomes connected. So now you can actually sit and drink your coffee and eat your rusks on the stoop, and somebody else is doing the work on your behalf, but you can monitor that absolutely from a distance. And then it started hooking into different systems. So as you got into these sophisticated tractors, they would tell you there's a storm on the way. It starts to interact with the rest of the farm. And it starts to tell you, last year when you did this in this exact location, there was damage to the plow, whatever it is. So it starts to build memory, it starts to build incident logs as you go along. And then it starts to play, so now it's a product system, right? It's no longer just a product. And then it starts to play with other systems, where it brings the weather in. It brings social media in. I hope it doesn't on a farm, but it could. It starts to bring in unstructured data. It starts to bring in pricing, perhaps of maize, before you start to harvest, and that kind of thing. So now it starts to play with different systems. And that really is where, in those last two blocks, where industrially it becomes interesting to us. By the way, that's what they currently look like. So they're driverless vehicles, and they completely go on location awareness, and the efficiency is extremely high because they do not work in shifts, as you can imagine. And that is the way the future is going. So when the futurist.com, it's a very nice website, Glenn Himstra, to follow. He predicted 2 years ago that driverless vehicles, industrial vehicles, so the typical Imperial or Barlow World kind of vehicles, would be adopted. The technology is ready. Economically, it's been proven viable. The only thing lagging behind was the legislation, and perhaps the issues like the insurance industry was lagging behind that. Very quickly, those things started picking up, and in the last week, I don't know if you followed the press releases, but the first delivery was made with an automated vehicle, and it was beer, by the way, so I think it might have been to this venue, if I look at the students by the pool. So it was definitely, it's a viable thing that is now possible to take over the world. All of a sudden, companies like Imperial don't have to buy their fleets anymore. They can lease it from Mercedes-Benz because they're paying for the service. How does that change their business model? So it has deep and profound impacts on how we make money. So none of those, that's a Mercedes-Benz truck. They are doing active piloting with that at the moment. If you look closely, you can see the driver sitting there, but he's on his iPad doing social media. That is a Rolls-Royce ship. It's a cargo ship. It's completely enclosed. So all of a sudden, the threat is no longer the actual pirates next to the Somali coast. All of a sudden, it is the hackers that now can take a whole ship and keep it at ransom somewhere, right? And at the bottom there, I was privy enough to be at the Boeing factory earlier this year. What a revelation. But those engines are no longer sold. So if SAIIE or Delta Airlines or Emirates buys a 747, 777, they do not buy their engines. The engines are held by GE, and they buy a model where they pay for flight hours. So where's the Internet of Things, and where it has the most potential business value is in factories for developing countries. So that's a list of everywhere, but for developing countries, it's factories. It is workplaces, so in large industrial sites like the Eskom environment, like the power stations, and they classify that as outside. I say classified outside is normally it's somewhere in the supply chain or the logistics industry. And if you look at the values, I'm going to read it for you. It's 850 billion, 650 billion, and 3.2 trillion. So it's mass, and that's dollars, by the way. That's the value they see that the Internet of Things can have, or the impact it can have on those industries. So massive potential value. The business models change from being transactional, so if you do this, I do this, to transactional to contractual, where we take gain share. So if we save you money, we will take a portion of that saving, to where we take expanded customer outcomes and we take dual risk. So we take risk together. So just like General Electric has an agreement with Delta Airlines to keep airplanes for certain flight miles in the air, their objective now is to maximize the flight hours out of an engine, where previously it wasn't their objective at all, right? If you look at the graph on the right-hand side, it really says at the bottom, that is the number of personal computers in the world between 2004 and 2015, so a 9-year period. Those are smartphones, then tablets. That massive grey block there is the Internet of Things. Smart TVs in green. and wearables like your Fitbit or your Apple Watch in black at the top. So if you look at just the number of devices out there, the growth, the exponential growth is definitely in the Internet of Things. I'm going to switch back quickly. GE I've spoken about. Initially when they started this initiative to not sell engines but to lease them, they didn't know what the business model would look like. They didn't know, but they knew that if they didn't do it, somebody else like Rolls-Royce would do it. And by clearly and very narrowly monitoring every engine for uptime and preventative maintenance and critical maintenance, they actually started making money. So they made about $1.5 billion in addition to their normal business in 2013. They doubled that and they doubled that. And that doubling of revenue year on year also shows you that, exponentially speaking, the business opportunities come about. Honeywell didn't see Google as Honeywell building maintenance, didn't see Google as a threat until Google bought Nest, which is those things that you can switch your lights on at certain times, get the temperature of your house right before you arrive. So using the internet to do building management. And obviously Google harvests data from that as well, which Honeywell didn't do at that point. ATI Specialty Materials, all they do is they use the Internet of Things for better factory management. So they would do it for synchronized logistics into the manufacturing line without human intervention. I can tell you now that a big portion of our business is doing exactly that for the motor manufacturing in South Africa. We do synchronized logistics to the line to make sure that the right stock arrives at exactly the right time. That business model in the next 10 years is dead because the Internet of Things will replace that. And that is why strategically it's important for us to look into that. What is preventing that? The last slide is really, if you look at why people do not adopt the Internet of Things today, massively en masse, very little of cost concerns, highly concerned about security concerns and privacy, as you can imagine. Because the moment that any device pings out information about you, about your behavior, about your company's behavior, that information has to be absolutely secure. And that is one of the preventative things. So if we can solve that, and there are brilliant minds working on that, then we will see a higher uptake of the Internet of Things.